So absolutely, I totally agree. To everybody seems to hate, and the negative feelings come out, and that the opposite of hate, of course, is love. And you have to make a conscious effort to be positive and to love and to smile. Otherwise you frown and you hate and you're miserable and you moan and complain, and it's just no good, is it? Because we know that when you turn your perspective into positive, happy things, and that's what you bring into your life, and amazing things start to happen and you don't even know it, and all these unusual things that you're not expecting come into your life. At the same time, when it's all negative, then people who are miserable and they're moaning and they're wondering why they're ill and they're not feeling very well, and their car might break down, and everything. It's like, which way do you want to go, right?
Yes, it's very interesting how when you can't express your feelings to the right person at the right time, you might miss a chance to connect with that person. But sometimes that feeling is so powerful, you don't need many words. And I just wonder, what is your opinion on vibrations, on your energy, on the way you express yourself, or the way sometimes just being silent is more powerful than saying anything?
Well, for sure, if somebody wants to get your attention, and they won't communicate with you when they go silent, oh my goodness, the silence. You've heard the expression, silence is deafening.
Yeah.
So, I know how that feels. Probably most of us do. Somebody who, might be in our lives from one time or another, and they're just not responding. So silence is deafening, but also silence is very powerful. And it's when, at the moment, everybody's filling their lives full of noise. They're on their phones, they have to listen to music, they're tweeting, they're texting, they're always on the go with something, interaction, something going on. They're not quiet, they're not being, they're not experiencing, and they're not silent. And so when you stop and there's nothing, it is the most beautiful feeling. And when you stop talking, that's when you can really listen. And that's really powerful. Everybody's so busy to be heard, voicing their opinion. The ego steps up. They want to be significant. And yet the reason we have two ears and one mouth is so that we can use both of our ears and truly listen to another human being. Because when you really give 100% attention to what somebody else is saying, and you listen intently with both of your ears, it's a wonderful feeling. And it's brilliant for them too, because it means that they are being heard, and it makes them feel good.
Wow, this is very powerful. And Natasha, you were mentioning earlier about the way politicians hate each other during the campaign while they are racing for office, or whatever it is that they try to achieve is always almost only if they step on somebody else's dream, only if they destroy somebody. Otherwise, they won't get there. So you put it very nicely, and it's a lot of cruelty out there. But what do you think other people should understand from this madness, from this hate between the people at the very top, which is supposed to inspire us and be our leaders? What is that making us? Because somehow we put them there, we elected them.
Yes, You are so right, and it's actually quite frightening, isn't it? Money and power, and yet it all comes from ego. It all comes from a point of ego. You know, somebody, it's like bigger and better. You know, if you go to some, I don't know, some lovely place like Monaco or, you know, South Spain, Puerto Banús, when you see all the yachts, you see them all parked up together, and then somebody wants a bigger and better yacht. Well, how big do you want your yacht to be? How much better do you want your yacht to be? How many bedrooms do you really need on your yacht? How many billions or millions of pounds do you need to spend on your yacht and your jet and your car and your house, on your diamonds, on your... These are all things, and things are to be enjoyed, of course they are, and to be used, but people are to be appreciated. And it saddens me so much that when the ego takes over, you can have somebody who's a brilliant mind, who is a strong person, who, you know, starts off with good intentions, and then what happens is the ego takes them and they almost become addicted to the power and the control, and they lose themselves. And we see it in politicians, we see it in pop stars, we see it in the rich and famous, but mainly the celebrities. You know, what happens to people when they have this money, this power, this celebrity status is they kind of fall off the wagon. They kind of turn to drink, turn to drugs, turn to all these crazy things that are really damaging to them and their souls and their essence. And yet they sort of seem to lose control a little bit. Like the ego is taking over so much that they lose sight of who they really are. And like you said, with the politicians, when they're running for office and they're fighting, rather than focusing on the benefits of voting for them, because what they stand for is really important and how they will help other people, so to inspire people to vote for them, they're doing the horriblest thing ever by criticizing and moaning and complaining and actually slagging off the competitors and their opponents. And yet I don't understand that, because the minute I hear something negative like that, it puts me off somebody. I think, well, why would they stoop that low? Why can't they have the conviction to stand up for what they believe in and to speak their truth? This is what I represent. This is what I'm going to do. This is what my belief is. I would love you to share it. Come and follow me. This is what we would love to hear, rather than, oh, well, you know, Hillary Clinton this and, you know, Hillary Clinton that. And, well, she's just doing her job, but she's doing the same thing. She's criticizing also. And it's like, well, why are you doing this? Because then the voters getting confused, and 1 minute they might think, oh, I know who I'm going to vote for, and then the next day it's like, actually, no, I don't know. Well, who is the least critical? And you just get so confused and overwhelmed with the wrong message. And yet to choose kindness over being right is so powerful. And to, you know, to not complain and criticize, to ditch the excuses, to not moan, to use gentle, kind words, to have compassion is so much more powerful.
Oscar Wilde said actually that I'm hoping I'm getting this right. Patriotism is the virtue of the vicious. So looking at this, what's happening recently, it's almost like setting the scene for being vicious. You know, they are not talking about their policy on health or jobs, or they're talking about the size of their hands, and it's just so, I don't know, it's despicable. I don't want to know what they talk when they talk about they want to injure each other, and they want to attack each other. I don't want to know what size is Donald Trump's penis. I really don't care. I want to know what he wants to do.
Yes.
For the American people, and I want to know that because that is going to impact the rest of the world.
Indeed.
So it's getting to a point where it's sick, and people around who are supposed to go and vote, they get sick and tired. And they will say, you know what, there's nobody I can vote for.
Well, that's the truth, isn't it? And this happens all over the world, and people get disillusioned, and in the end, they abstain. And yet, by abstaining, you are inadvertently voting for the person that you don't want to get into power. And you know what you say is so accurate, and it's the truth that there is no mileage in an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He hit me first, so I'm going to hit him back, but I'm going to hit him harder. You know, if somebody pokes you, you punch them back. If somebody punches you, you bash them over the head with a stick. And if somebody bashes you over the head with a stick, you stab them with a knife. And if you get stabbed with a knife, you shoot them with a gun. And it's like, where is it all going to end? Somebody has to stop, and somebody has to be big enough and courageous enough and connected to themselves enough to be able to say, I'm sorry. Because then, you know, you're moving in a different direction. And when people start being kind to one another, you smile at somebody, they smile back. And it softens their hearts, it softens their souls, it actually relaxes their muscles. And therefore, you know, you are moving in the right direction, and you start to realize that we are all part of the same entity. We are all human beings. We are all the same. We are all connected. And you realize that we're all here to help each other. What is the point in a civil war? You don't get the ants fighting each other for supremacy. You don't get the bees fighting. No, they all work together. You just got to look at the ants and how they work. You've got to look at the bees and how they work. You look at any documentary and you will see it's poetry in motion. Together, they are so powerful. United we stand, divided we fall. We've heard that so many times, and yet what does it mean? It truly means when we're fighting against one another, when we're competing against one another, then we are missing a trick. We are missing the amazing energy that combined we have, you know, as a human entity, because each and every one of us is an energy being. And one person has so much energy, and yet when they're standing in their positive and they're in their flow, they're doing what they love and they're meant to do with their natural gifts and skills, they then join with somebody else, then they collaborate with somebody else and they create a team. Oh my goodness. And the power of the energy, it's like an energy ball, it's just rising and rising and rising, and it's rising in a positive way. And therefore, together we can create so many amazing, fantastic, beautiful things. You look at any buildings around the world, the Taj Mahal, the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, government buildings, beautiful, beautiful palaces around the world. Now, was that one person saying, I want to do it this way, and everybody else disagreeing? No, of course not. Would you find the orchestra, the lead violinist playing their own tune and ignoring the conductor and everybody else doing what they wanted? No, of course not. Because when you get people that work together with a common focus and a common goal, they can produce the most beautiful things. Look at the most amazing music that is written by beautiful composers. That's all of the musicians working together. And you know, the construction workers and the architects and the plumbers and the engineers and the electricians and the plasterers and the painters and the decorators and the refurbishment, when all, and the gardeners and the landscapers, when they all get together, look what beauty they produce. And we've only got to look around at nature and even the own work that we create ourselves to see that it's not when we stand on our own and do our own thing and not collaborate that things are so beautiful and magnificent. But when we join together, that's when we create amazing things. So rather than not be happy for somebody, be jealous of somebody, why don't you say, congratulations? The next time you walk down the street, I urge you, when you see somebody with a beautiful house or with a magnificent car, to say to them, well done, you must have worked so hard to achieve that. Because then when you start appreciating what beautiful and amazing things are around you, more of that comes into your life, because that's how the law of attraction works. When you appreciate what you have, you actually get more, you invite more and encourage more and magnetize more of that into your life. When you're bitching and you're moaning, you're complaining about everything and you're criticizing everything, then you're sending out negative energies, and that's what you'll get back. So I urge you to just have a day of doing it and see what happens, and then a week, then see what happens. And I promise you, when you're looking at the positives, when you're being grateful for what you've got, and when you realize that working together and the skills and the talents of everybody else, you're appreciating and seeing them for what they are without judgment and with acceptance, your life will start improving.
This is so true, Natasha. And between since we end the first part of this episode, I had so many reactions from our listeners, and mainly from America, sending me links. That's why I mentioned that episode, sending me links and saying, you are talking about living a blissful life and being honest and being kind, and actually what's happening, it's a brutal violation of mankind right now in front of our very eyes, and we have a duty to protect what we have and not trade it for something so horrible, because all these sentences they hear on the podium when they exchange those I don't know how to call them, they're not ideas, they are bad communication, low energy type of communication, full of negativity, and people who, the audience, which is about 300 million watching those elections, what goes through their mind is terrible. They are thinking, oh my God, it's really burning, because this is so unjust. They're expecting leaders to be talking about ideas and come with ideas and come with solutions and turn challenges into opportunities, where what they hear it's nothing to do with leadership. So it's very hard for our listeners to focus on any other than the brutal truth which is happening in front of them, and most of them are terrified of what's next. So what would you say? How would they take those sentences? What they should allow go into their head? How they could stop this burn, this terrible reality that's happening right now?
Yes, well, to be a leader is a huge, huge responsibility, because you are leading your people. And, to be a true leader, if you go back hundreds of years, well, I don't even have to go back too many hundreds of years, but the true leaders led from the front line. They would not expect their people to do something they weren't prepared to do. They were not sitting in an office telling somebody else to fight and they're safe in their office. They would be saying, this is our principle, these are our morals, these are our standards, these are our laws, this is what we feel passionate about, because this is for the good of everybody. This is for the good of the women, the children, the old people, the people who can't do things for themselves, the rich, the poor, everybody. This is what is important, and this is what we stand for. And therefore, the leaders would, be prepared to put themselves out. They weren't hiding behind an Armani suit. They weren't hiding behind a bulletproof a vehicle. They were there in the front line, and they led by example. And it's really important to remember that it's the ego again that takes hold of a person and strips them of their essence, their soul, who they are. And it is terrifying, and it is about power, and it is about money, but at the root of it all is the ego. And if the way I imagine it is, on one of the shoulders you've got a little devil, like a little cartoon devil, that's your ego. On the other one of your shoulders you've got a little angel, a little cartoon angel, that's your essence. Now, okay, our ego is there for a reason, yeah, to keep us safe, to keep us out of danger. The adrenaline goes, it kicks in if we're being chased by a lion or a tiger or something like that. and fear is there for a reason. But most of the time, we don't need that ego, because if it gets carried away and it's leading to other things that we don't need. And really, it's a responsibility of the leaders, all the leaders all over the world, to think about what is really important to mankind, what is really important to your people, not at the expense of anybody else, but with the inclusion of everybody else. That's what's really important, and that's what counts. And when a leader looks within and sees what's really important, what's really necessary, and looks ahead, not just the first step, but 20 steps down the line, not the first generation, but 5 generations, 10 generations down the line. What is the impact in 5 generations' time of having somebody who will build a big factory that will pump out all this nasty pollutions and nasty pollutants into the river, that will affect the fish, and the wildlife will suffer, and all the fish will die, and the river will run into the sea, which will affect the big animals, and therefore all of the food on the food chain, all of the fish, the little fish and the big fish and the rivers and the sea that it goes into will be affected, and therefore all of the pollutants will go into the fish, and our children will eat the fish and they'll have brain disease because of it, and then generations upon generations upon generations will have no clean fish, because the water will be dangerous and the fish will die, there'll be no food, or will be polluted by it, and they'll cause all these other things. So what I'm saying is, it is the responsibility of a leader not to just think of the bottom line, but to think about this generation, the next generation, and what is the right decision to make, that they can hold themselves accountable for it, rather than having a quick fix to get into government, have their nice moment of power, moment of glory. They can then have a high salary and live happily ever after. The kids can be in private school and they can have a wonderful place by the sea, and yet they haven't thought about anybody else, only themselves. So when you look outside of that and you realize that we are all connected, when you look at the little girls and you look at the little boys who are poor and who are on the street, who are being mistreated and dragged into all kinds of horrible and horrific things, that go on around the world. When you imagine that each and every one of those boys and girls is your own son, is your own daughter, then you will start to see them in a different way. All children are important, all children count, all people are important, all people count, no matter where they're born, no matter where they live, no matter what they have or have not got. They are as important as the next person. The poor child that is brought up in the slums in India, in Africa, the most horrendous places on this earth, they are as important as the prince and princesses around the world who live in palaces, because every human being counts, every life's important. And it's when we lose that connection with humanity, that's when things start to go desperately wrong. When we allow the ego to take over, and power and greed is important to us, that's when we lose sight of what it's all about.
So do you think, Natasha, that, how should I phrase this? Do you think that the fact that we have these gigantic hyenas going berserk on the prime political scene of the world is a result of the fact that we, each one of us, the listeners, don't get involved, don't know what they want, don't stand up for themselves, for their beliefs, for their values, for their actions? And because perhaps we got so sick and tired of witnessing how the people who are supposed to create things fell in love with things and start forgetting that they're supposed to love people, not things. Where do you stand? I know you got amazing values, and that reflects within the way you treat other people and the way you help other people. But what do you think is happening to us as society, as a society? And where do you think is this going?
That's a very, very good question, and it is a huge subject. And yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to do with what we're fed. You know, people watch the news and we are spoon fed all the information that the government wants us to hear, that the news stations want us to hear, that the tabloids want us to read, that the magazines and the publications want to tell us and share with us. And it's only when you take yourself away from that that you start to be less of a sheep. And I'm not being saying this in a disrespectful way in any way at all. I'm very maverick myself, and so I never fitted in. And so as a child, I always felt like I was on the fringes and I was an oddity and I was a bit weird. And but that's okay, because now I know that the reason for that was because I was never meant to fit into, you know, the norm, or whatever, what's normal and what's standard and what's ordinary or whatever. I was meant to stand out and to speak the truth. Now, it's not for everybody, because not everybody wants that and not everybody is made that way. But that's the beauty of the fact that we are all independent and we are all individual and we are all different. But the truth of the matter is that we are being controlled. We are being controlled by, you know, our parents to a certain extent, sometimes the education system, the government, the police. You know, we are being controlled what speed we travel on the roads. We are being controlled by, you know, monitoring as Big Brother is watching. We are being monitored and spoon fed all this information, what the doctors tell you. And yet what's happening is we are being more and more ignorant. We are not educating ourselves. It's only when you question what's not serving you. And it will only happen when you start to think, hang on a minute, I've just said that, but I don't believe it. Then you can start questioning. Then you can start challenging. Then you can start changing. Because when you do your own research into these things, you know, the pharmaceutical industry is a powerhouse. And yet the holistic industry, you know, is completely the opposite. And yet the results are the same. Now, I am not saying that there's not a place for doctors and surgeons. They are amazing, fantastic, giving people, and they save lives and they risk their own lives and they study to make the world a better place for lots of different people. But when you get somebody who goes to the doctor and they expect a pill for every ill, so to speak, that you start to worry about them giving their power away, giving them their own control away. And they are trusting that the medication that they're being given by their doctor, because their doctor is thinking this is the right thing for this, they are not, and they're accepting it. The side effects of so many medications that people are on for all kinds of different things because they're told they have to, are never ever questioned. They're never questioned. And people can be on these medications for years, decades sometimes. My beautiful granny was on um, a medication for years, decades in fact, and it was never ever queried or questioned. And the truth is, when people get older, their absorption levels reduce. So they don't need so much. You know, somebody who's like really young or really old, they need a smaller dose. Somebody who's sort of kind of in the middle of their lives, or, you know, in between an adult, who healthy adult, will might need a higher dose. And yet my granny was taking the same dose of this medicine and it was never monitored. And in the end, she ended up in hospital and she was delirious. And what happened was, it took about 2 to 3 weeks for her to calm down from this deliriousness. And it was because she'd literally overdosed because she was taking too much of the medication for herself at her age. She was taking the prescribed amount, and yet the build-up effect was so damaging to her. Thankfully, she was okay, and after she was taken off all of her medication, in a few weeks' time she calmed down and she was back to normal. But she was utterly delirious. And that is an example that I'm sharing because we accept what we're told. We don't challenge and question it. We don't change it. We don't do our own research. We accept it. And therefore we are creating ignorance in ourselves. And we're also scared. You know, we're scared to stop taking certain medicines if if we're told we need to have them. We're scared of standing up to the police, standing up to, you know, the authorities, standing up to the government, because we might get in trouble. And yet, what we need to do almost is to stand up for what we believe in and stand true to ourselves. And then this celebrity status that's gone completely crazy. It's like people, I remember for the first time, and it's some years ago now, seeing pictures of somebody, and I can't remember who it was. It was a female personality, and they were an it girl. They were literally named an it girl, and I'm like, what on earth is that? Somebody is famous for just being recognized. They're not doing anything. They don't have any particular skills or talents that they're sharing with the world. Of course they have them, but they're not known for anything in particular. They're not a musician, they're not a singer, they're not a writer, they're not an actress, they're not a physician, they're not a mathematician. And yet they were just famous for showing up at parties and doing stuff. And I just thought, oh my goodness, the world has gone stark raving bonkers. You know, and it's like, again, it's all down to the ego. It has gone mad. This celebrity status seems to be the only thing that's important, the only thing that matters. It's like you have to be seen, you have to be visible, you have to be recognized to be somebody. No, you have to connect with yourself, your true self, and you have to understand why you're here, what your own personal, individual gifts and skills are, how you can best share them with the world in a way that's meaningful and affects somebody else in a positive way, that will, you know, have an impact on the world, and that will do good. And then spend your life honing that craft to the best of your ability and being the best you can be on every level. That is what is important. That is what counts. And yet we have lost sight of this because of this celebrity status, because people want money and power, because of ego, and because we are controlled and contained and literally programmed. Why do they call them programs, television programs? Because they're programming us to believe in a certain way, to have certain fears. Don't step out of the box. Why is it that, you know, if you're brought up in a council house, why would you not expect to be the next world leader? Who's to say you couldn't be? Why put limits on yourself? Why put boundaries around yourself? Why ring fence yourself in? Why not say, I can do anything? And if you look at the word impossible, and this is so widely spread now, thankfully, if you look at the word impossible and you put a little apostrophe in it, it turns out to be I'm possible.
So true. So true. Coming back to our, this is so beautiful, Natasha. I could listen to you for hours. Coming back to our topic, why do you think we got to this point where we are aware we live in an upside down world where people love things instead of loving people, and creating better life choices stands really for loving people, for being kind with no reason? What do you think is the best and most beautiful thought that our listeners could take away tonight or this morning or this afternoon, and just come back to it each time they have doubts about the fact that best things in life are not things, are people? How can we prove that this is the essence? Best things in life are not things, are people.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in essence, we've lost our way, we've lost our vision, and we've lost sight of humanity. We've lost our spirituality, we've lost our essence. We seem to be preoccupied with, to the large extent, of keeping up with the Joneses. Why is it that somebody gets a new car and their neighbors feel that they need to get a new car. I don't get that. It's just bizarre. You know, really, when you, and I think it's all to do with insecurity, actually. And I think a lot of it's to do with lacking the love for yourself, not doing the inner work. Because when you start, if you build a building and you have no foundations, the building will fall down. Yeah. And if you build a building with really strong foundations, then it will stand for a very long time. And we as human beings are exactly the same. When you learn to really truly love yourself and connect with who you are and stand in your own power, knowing who you are, then the need for external reference, validation reduces. When you learn that it's yourself that can make you happy, rather than Prince Charming on a white horse or the girl of your dreams or a new house and new car, when you truly make the decision that happiness is a thought, well, happiness is an emotion, and an emotion is a thought, and thoughts can be changed. And I was reading something really interesting the other day. If you hold a pen or a pencil in your hand really, really tightly, before too long, how will your hand feel? It'll feel tense, it'll feel taut, and actually the rest of your body will be focusing so hard on keeping the pen and pencil tight in your hand that it will start to get tense. Your shoulders will start to tense up, your jaw will tense up, your feet and your legs might even tense up, and your stomach might tense up. And yet, if you imagine that that pen or pencil is an emotion, like hate or greed or love or passion or anything, an emotion that is so strong it's taking over you, not necessarily a positive emotion, but a negative emotion, the ones, like I say, below. So anything that's a negative emotion that's below where you need to be, negative emotions like hate and blame and criticism and negativity and greed and lust and all of those things, any negative emotions that you hold on tight to, if you then choose to see that pen as an emotion, that's a negative emotion, it's hate. You can't forgive someone, you hate them, they've hurt you. When you release your hand and you hold that pen or pencil in your hand and just rock it backwards and forwards, what you're actually doing is you're releasing the tension, and your muscles are relaxing, and you can see that emotion for what it is. And then you realize that that emotion is just a thought, and you have almost taken yourself away from that, like it's a cloud in the sky, like a big black cloud, and it's not attached to you anymore. And that is really powerful when you can do that. When you stand in your own power, when you truly love who you are and accept who you are, and you never ever compare yourself to anyone else, that's when you can stand tall. Because why would you compare yourself to anybody else when everybody's different? Nobody's going to be as tall as the tallest person, so don't compare yourself to somebody tall. Nobody's going to have the longest hair if they compare themselves to the person who has the longest hair. We are made perfect with all of our perfect imperfections. We are unique. And this is what we should celebrate. Rather than trying to change ourselves on the outside, change ourselves on the inside, look inside, embrace and accept who you are. Never compare yourself to anybody else. And yet, at the same time, have a mind that's not blinkered. Have a mind that's open to every single possibility, so that when new things come along and show up on your horizon, you can be excited, you can be happy about them.
Wow, Natasha, this is really beautiful. And I get this sense of urgency from you to put the message out there that you, the listener, you yourself, myself, everybody, each of each one of us knows out there, we have to keep moving, because opening doors and doing new things and being curious about yourself, who you truly are, will give you the chance to create better life choices, which in effect, after today's great conversation, I can see clearly creating better life choices is all about create things but love people. Thank you
Oh,
ever so much, Natasha. It's been an absolute delight talking to you and going into the dirty subjects of today's politics and coming back out into the breeze of beautiful ideas. I'm so grateful for you sharing with our listeners everything you hold dear in your heart. Over to you, Natasha. Till next week, from me is create things but love people.
thank you so much, Marina. Absolutely. And that was such a beautiful thing you said. Yes, we are learning. We will learn every day for the rest of our lives. And when we learn, we expand our minds and we expand our universe. And everything flows. Air flows, energy flows, water flows, blood flows, and we must flow. We must flow together and appreciate people and understand how precious every single life is, and enjoy the stuff around us, but really value the people. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Lots of love. Goodbye.
Bye.